It has been a whirlwind of a week for the White House, with a ton of announcements and policy changes coming out. So we've gone through all of it to try and see the bigger picture. In this explainer, we're going to break down not just what they announced, but the story they're trying to tell about the economy, about energy, and really about the nation itself.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down for you. We've organized the week's events into 5 key areas. We'll start with their economic report card. Then we'll jump into their big moves on energy and global trade. After that, it's all about homeland security. And finally, we're going to connect all the dots to see the larger American story they're trying to build.
First up, the economy. Right out of the gate, the administration kicked off the week by highlighting a whole series of data points, all designed to paint a very specific, very rosy picture of American prosperity. And the big headline grabber, the centerpiece of their message, was this huge stock market number. The Dow Jones hitting 50,000 for the very first time. The White House is framing this as direct proof that their policies are working, boosting things like retirement accounts. Now, it is worth remembering the Dow only tracks 30 of the biggest companies, so while it's a huge symbolic milestone for sure, it doesn't represent the entire economy.
And it wasn't just the stock market. The administration also celebrated what it called a blockbuster jobs report. As you can see here, they reported 172,000 private sector jobs were created in January, which, significantly outpaced what a lot of economists were predicting. This just fueled their narrative of a booming economy.
Okay, but what about inflation, right? To address concerns about rising costs, the White House pointed to an inflation rate of 2.4%. They're really framing this as a major victory, highlighting that it's the lowest it's been in months and, in their view, a clear sign that their policies are working to get prices under control.
So the next logical question is, are wages keeping up? Well, the administration says yes, and they're pointing to this number, a claimed $1,400 increase in real pay for private sector workers. Their argument here is pretty simple. Wages are now officially growing faster than prices, which means more money is going back into people's pockets.
So at the end of the day, the crucial takeaway is the triumphant narrative the White House is pushing. This statement from the Deputy Press Secretary just wraps it all up perfectly. Their core message is that the economic agenda isn't just working, it's delivering historic, expectation-shattering results.
All right, let's move on to the second pillar and see how this all connects. A major focus on energy policy. And this week, the administration's actions and its messaging were laser-focused on one industry in particular.
You guessed it, coal. The administration really doubled down on its support for the coal industry with a Champion of Coal event. And the visuals, they were very deliberate, placing coal miners right at the front and center to really hammer home this message of an American coal revival.
But this wasn't just talk. This led to 2 major policy moves. First, an executive order directing the military, and what's interesting is the document used its old name, the Department of War, to buy its power from coal plants. And second, a massive deregulatory action, completely revoking the 2009 endangerment finding.
So you're probably asking, what on earth is the endangerment finding? Well, it was basically the legal foundation, the bedrock, for a whole host of climate regulations for years. The administration described this finding as a tool that was weaponized by political opponents, and they claimed that getting rid of it would provide historic regulatory relief.
And they attached a massive price tag to this deregulation. The White House claims that getting rid of this one rule, just this one, will save American families and businesses an incredible $1.3 trillion in regulatory costs. This quote, which the White House shared, really gets to the core of their whole argument. Industry supporters are claiming that shutting down U.S. coal plants hurts our own energy supply while doing very little to actually affect global emissions, since, as they point out, the U.S. coal fleet is a pretty small fraction of the world's total.
Okay, that brings us to theme number 3 coming out of this week's announcements, trade. The administration unveiled several new agreements, and they were all based on a very specific America First principle. The big idea here, the guiding philosophy, is something they call reciprocal trade. So what does that actually mean? Well, the stated goal is to counter what they see as unfair foreign practices by basically making sure that other countries' tariffs on our goods are mirrored by our tariffs on theirs.
And we saw this policy in action this week with these new deals with India, Bangladesh, and North Macedonia. And you can see a pretty clear pattern here. The U.S. adjusts its tariffs, and in exchange, it gets these major purchase commitments. I mean, look at India buying over $500 billion in U.S. goods, and North Macedonia buying American natural gas. It's a very direct, very transactional approach to trade.
All right, let's shift gears to the fourth pillar, which revolves around domestic security. Here, the administration highlighted data points and some recent court victories related to two key areas, crime and immigration.
Now, on immigration, the administration made a really extraordinary claim that there have been 0 illegal crossings at the southern border for 9 straight months. This claim, which would mean a completely sealed border, was announced right alongside a court victory that upheld their policy of mandatory detention for anyone who enters illegally.
The White House also pushed a narrative of falling crime rates pretty hard. They released data like the chart you're seeing here, showing sharp drops in homicides in major cities. The message is crystal clear. Their tough law and order approach is directly responsible for making our cities safer. And finally, on this homeland security front, they made a really strong push for voter ID laws. They backed this up with polling data that suggests the idea has broad bipartisan support. Their argument is that this is just a common-sense measure that the vast majority of Americans, no matter their party, already agree with. So, we've talked about policy, we've talked about numbers. But beyond all these specific announcements, the week's communications also tried to do something a little bit bigger, to weave all of these different actions into a grander national narrative.
And this really raises the key question that helps us understand their whole strategy. It's not just about the what, it's about the why. How does the administration frame all these actions as part of a bigger vision for the country?
Well, one way they do it is by invoking these iconic historical figures. For instance, in a message on Thomas Edison's birthday, the administration connected the inventor's spirit of hard work and tenacity directly to their own agenda of deregulation and American entrepreneurship.
And they did the exact same thing with Abraham Lincoln. A presidential message tied their law and order stance and their use of high tariffs directly to Lincoln's legacy. By doing this, they're framing their policies not as something radical or new, but as a return to core historic American principles. And that's a pretty powerful way to wrap up a week of messaging.